All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD1000 Web Development Technologies course, I've been going through and creating a series of video presentations that are based off of the PowerPoint slides for one of the textbooks for this class, that being Murox JavaScript and jQuery 4th edition. I am in Chapter 17, and we're still going through the basic skills working with functions. Now, I did want to mention something to you, and that is, so far we've talked in here in this chapter, we talked a little bit about arrow functions in the this statement. We're now going to get into using call and bind. And when you are looking for this stuff, and you're looking for examples, etc., where do you go? And I mean, the obvious answer is to go out to W3 schools, all right? And it is. It's a great resource. So they've got some arrow function examples here, ones that return a value, but most of the stuff that's in here is pretty darn easy. And notice what happens right after that is this, all right? But the point is, if I want something that's a little bit easier probably to understand and take a look at, I go to W3 schools. If I want something that's a little more inclusive, a little more complex, let's say, I go out to the Mozilla Developer Network at developer.mozilla.org. And so here is function expressions. And you're going to find the examples are a little bit more complex. Plus, they're going to show you more examples, and there's going to be a lot more text involved in here. All right, same kind of thing with the this keyword. All right, W3 schools, and this is almost, what we talked about in a little earlier in one of the slides. But they show this in a method, this all by itself, this in a function, and if that's not enough for you, you can go out to here, all right, again, to the Mozilla Developer Network. Now, what's next in here is we're going to go through the JavaScript function call and the bind method. And it says with a call method, you can write a method that can be used on different objects. In JavaScript, all functions are object methods. If a function is not a method of a JavaScript object, it is a function of the global object. The example below creates an object with 3 properties: first name, last name, full name. So there it is. So here's an object. These are the 2 properties. And this is the function which just combines those 2 properties. Pretty obvious, right? So my object.fullName, as it says, should return John Doe. So we do this. All right, and we're sticking it into here. We could have console.logged it or something else. But again, if I come in here and change it to me and run it, there it is. Now that, again, like I said, should be pretty obvious. All right. And again, they talk about what this keyword is doing in there. The call method, as it says, is a predefined JavaScript method which can be used to invoke a method with an owner object as its argument. So what's in here? Well, now notice we're in here, we're creating a generic person. All right, and that person is going to basically have a function in there that's called full name, and it's going to return the combination of the 2. Then we create, we just happen to call those person 1, person 2, and person. They don't have to be that name, I believe. I don't know why it would have to. But when we say person.fullName and we call person 1, it should print that out. Again, if I substitute that with me and run it, there it is. All right. What if I did this? Put in my wife. Okay, that's fine, right? Now, what if I grab this and now I say inner HTML plus equals, I don't know if it'll work or not, person2. And we run it. And we get both of them. All right, so plus equals person1. Can we say this in here? Plus \n. I don't know if it'll take that or not. It did not. How about a line break? There's what we wanted. So what we have done in here with this thing that you see right here is we have created a generic routine that can be called by either one of these. All right. What if I came in here and said this? Const Bob equals first name Bob, last name Smith, and it's a different syntax there. All right, and now I'm going to do this. Bob. And I didn't put the plus equal there. Oh. And there we all are. So it didn't have to be called person is what I was trying to show you right there. All right. They show it again, and they show how you can do it with arguments. So here we're putting in the country. So when we do that, okay, and each one of these has got a comma in between. Would have thought they could have put in a comma with a space, which fixes that one and that one. All right. Now again, if you want more, you go out to function.prototype.call. All right. So as we jump back into here then, not there, into here, and close that. How to use the call method to borrow a method from the array object. So we're borrowing, as it says, the join. Okay. All right. So hopefully you got at least a little something out of that. Now notice what they have in here now. They're rewriting the same test scores application that we looked at earlier. And as you put in a new score, if necessary, it'll update the high score or the low score. All right. It will update the average by adding all of them. So if I put in here a 50, 50 should go on the end here. Now it should be 50, 98, 94, and the 77 will drop out. 50 will become the new low score, and the average, I'm sure, will go down because it's a 50. And again, they run through the HTML and look at the JavaScript. Notice they're using arrow functions here. All right, here's an example as it says that illustrates a closure. What's a closure? Well, again, we can go in and we can take a look at what a closure is. And all right, I just stepped out for a second to try to get some more information on closures. And they mentioned their JavaScript variables can belong to the local or global scope. When something is global scope, it's defined outside of any method. When something is local scope, it's defined inside of the method. All right, so a function can access all variables defined inside the function like this. So when we look at this, all right, that shouldn't be any kind of problem at all. We're defining a variable in here called a, and we're returning a times a, so that'll return 16 to whatever calls this. You can see it does. All right. Hopefully that makes total sense. But this will work as well, even though let is not defined in there, because this variable has global scope. In other words, it's a global variable. It can be used anywhere in the routine. As it says, a is a global variable. In a web page, global variables belong to the window object and can be used and changed by any and all scripts on the page. A local variable can only be used inside of the function where it's defined. It's hidden. Global and local variables with the same name are different variables, which is another key point. All right. So we're saying here this equals a times a, and we're setting it right there. What if that's 5? It's now 25. All right, again, the examples in here, many of them may seem trivial, but it really is probably a good thing for you to take a good look at this. All right. Global variables live until the page is discarded, so they stay as long as the page does. Local variables have short lives. Typically, they're born after the curly brace. They die after, after they're born at the beginning curly brace. They die after the ending curly brace. So suppose you want to use a variable for counting something, and you want this counter to be available to all functions. You could use a global variable like this. But it's, as it says, there's a problem with this. Any code on the change, or on the page rather, can change this counter. So anybody can basically change the counter. So we want this counter variable to be local to here, but we don't want anybody else to be able to use it. So look at what we've got here. All right, you might think this is a way to do it. Okay, and we add 1 to it 3 times. It says the counter should now be 3, but it's now 0. And the reason that it's now 0 is we've reset it in there every time. It says it did not work because we display the global counter up here instead of the local counter in here. It says we can remove the global counter and access the local counter by letting the function return it. So now notice what we have. All right. So it's better, but when you take a quick look at it, it says the counter should now be 3, but it is 1. Why? Because it's 1 here, we return 1, then we reset it again to 0. And we add 1 to it, so it's still 1. It says it does not work because we reset the local counter every time we call the function. An inner function can resolve this. An inner function is a function within a function. So notice what we have in here. Every single time through, counter is 0, but we've got this function plus that adds 1 to counter. So a plus will now have 1 in it. All right, then we return it. And if we call it 3 times, ideally at least, What if we do this? What if we do plus and plus? All right. It's 3 because we've got this. All right, so we're returning counter every time. Let's call it once. Let's take this statement and let's say plus equal add plus equal add. Now it's going to run the numbers together. All right. So can we return counter plus a space? I don't know if that'll even work. Well, it's got 1, 1, 1. The good news is that worked. The bad news is that it didn't reset it every time. I think it's because it's resetting it right there. All right, we're again at 17 minutes, so I will continue this in the next lecture.